Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Megan Shebeck, trustee of the DuPage Foundation and chair of the DuPage Community Transformation Partnership. The grant opportunity we will be talking about today is being offered through the DuPage Community Transformation Partnership, which is a collaborative endeavor between DuPage Foundation and DuPage County. We're very excited about this opportunity and look forward to all that we can accomplish together. Our information session today will be approximately 30 minutes long, with information provided followed by a question and answer period. Please provide your questions in the Q&A area. We will answer as many as possible. Frequently asked questions are currently up on our website, and any new questions from today's session will be added to that. Thank you again for being here today. Hope you're in a safe space for wherever your weather warnings are coming from. And I would like to introduce Paula Deacon Garcia, DuPage County Board Member and Vice Chair of the Human Services Committee.
Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to give Greg Schwarzy, who's Chair of Human Services, he wanted to be here, but he is unavailable due to another event he had to attend, but I'm happy to be here. Last year, the County Board voted to create this partnership with the DuPage Foundation. As I'm sure you know by now, the board granted $10.6 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds to DuPage Foundation to administer a 5-year grant program, and we are now in the second year of offering grant opportunities. The goal of the program is to support social service organizations that are providing assistance to DuPage County residents in the area of food insecurity, housing instability, mental health, and substance use disorder. Last year, we awarded almost $5 million through the partnership. $1.1 million was distributed to support the immediate needs of residents in crisis, and $3.8 million was awarded for 18 transformational programs. Within the next few months, we will begin compiling the metrics of the grants awarded in 2022, and we'll get a true understanding of the impact that we've already had. We know a lot has been accomplished over the past year, and we're excited to continue working together with local nonprofits to see more impact and to support DuPage residents in year 2 of this endeavor. Now I would like to introduce Barb Sapaniak, Vice President for Programs for DuPage Foundation.
Thank you, Paula. I'm really thrilled that we have the opportunity to use these funds to support those who have been adversely affected by the pandemic. While the fear of getting COVID, I should say, seems to have lessened somewhat, the reality of its impact has not. In fact, we've all seen the needs related to food insecurity, housing instability, mental health, and substance use disorder escalate even more. With that said, we know that there are many organizations doing great work, and there are many in need of funding to support that work. However, we are focused specifically on these 4 issues, and unfortunately, that does mean that we are not able to fund every type of organization through this particular grant program. I'd like to talk about the eligibility. So organizations eligible to apply are 501c3 social service agencies, in which more than 50% of the individuals served are DuPage County residents. If your organization serves a larger area, you are eligible if you have a facility in DuPage County from which you deliver services. So for example, there are some organizations that are based out of Chicago, but they actually have a DuPage County office or building or center here. They would be eligible. If you don't primarily serve DuPage and don't have a center here, you may still be eligible if you have an advisory board that is specifically focused on programs geared toward the needs of DuPage residents. However, in that case, you will need to show evidence that this advisory board has been operational for a while. In all cases, applicants will need to show a direct connection to one of the issue areas. So last year, we offered 2 grant opportunities through the DuPage Community Transformation Partnership, Immediate Intervention and Transformational. The transformational grants were 2-year grants, so that opportunity is not being offered this year, but we will offer it again in 2024. And we hope that you, knowing that this opportunity will be available next year, will encourage you to start thinking about some of the transformational solutions and strategies to address some of the most pressing needs in your organization in these target areas. The immediate intervention grant opportunity is being offered this year and will be offered again next year. And these grants are intended to provide financial resources so that organizations can respond to the current needs of your clients or to quickly increase organizational capacity. The minimum amount you can apply for is $20,000, and we haven't set a maximum. While we aren't limiting the amount for which you can apply, we really want you to be realistic about your capacity to manage the size of the grant being requested. The appropriate amount will be dependent on the size of your organization, the scope of the need, outcomes you will be measuring, and the number of residents that will be served. The foundation has to report annually to the county board on the impact of these grants, and the county in turn submits a report to the U.S. Treasury. So grant recipients will be required to keep track of and submit specific impact metrics regarding the populations and numbers served in a final report. So listed on this slide are some of the types of grants that we will not consider through this process. And I'm not going to read all of them, but I do want to call your attention specifically to the restriction for the purchase of food. Last year, we did support food purchases through the immediate intervention process, but the need was so great that the DuPage County Board allocated an additional $5 million in ARPA funds to support food insecurity. The county they established the parameters for the use of those funds, and they have already distributed some of the funding directly to mid and large size food pantries to support the purchase of food in 2023. And while we won't fund food purchases this year, we will consider applications for capacity needs, such as refrigerators, freezers, software, hardware, rescue vans. I'm sure there's others. The application process begins with the submission of a letter of intent, or LOI, that is due by 5 o'clock on March 24th. After review by our evaluation team, we will send an email in late April advising applicants the status of their LOI requests. And as always, we don't know how many LOIs we'll receive, but we do anticipate that we will unfortunately not be able to invite everyone to complete a full application. For organizations that are invited to submit an application, the due date for submission will be May 26th, and applicants will be advised the status of the request in late June, and grants will be awarded in July. So the guidelines and the LOI application are already posted on the foundation's website, dupagefoundation.org. And the LOIs and applications are submitted through the DuPage Foundation grant portal. And that link is also available on the website. For those of you who have applied to the foundation in the past, you will continue to use that account to submit your LOI and application. If you have not applied, you'll need to create an account when you initially go to the site. And as always, we encourage you to allow plenty of time to submit your requests. The LOIs and applications are due by 5 p.m. on the specified due dates. And we are very, very strict about the deadline. And we will not accept any applications received after that time. Unfortunately, we have seen things go wrong at the very last minute, and there simply wasn't time for those organizations to resolve the problems they were having by the deadline. Some of the last minute snafus we've heard about, documents didn't upload as quickly as expected or were too large. An applicant's internet went out right before they were going to submit, or they hit the submit button, but the application didn't go through because something was missing or a required question was not answered. And believe me, I don't like telling anyone that their application won't be considered because it was late. Even if it's only a minute or two beyond the deadline, we won't accept it. We really, really need to be fair to everyone who submits the application on time. Now, I'd like to introduce Mary Keating, DuPage County Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Barb. A team made up of board and staff members from both the foundation and the county, as well as community members familiar with DuPage Human Services landscape, will review the LOIs and will invite selected organizations to submit a full proposal, providing more detailed information. The evaluation team will be considering some of the following questions when assessing grant LOIs and applications. Is the community need that the request seeks to address clearly described? Is there a clear description of the program, evidence of the strategy's effectiveness, and an indication as to how outcomes will be measured? Has the population that will be served been negatively impacted by the pandemic and its economic downturn? And will resources and services be deployed in an equitable manner? Has the organization demonstrated that they have the capacity to provide detailed reporting on the use of the grants? Does the applicant organization have experience providing programs in one of these issue areas? There may also be additional factors depending on the specific area of the grant request. And finally, is the organization financially healthy? I'd now like to introduce David Weiss, DuPage Foundation Vice President for Finance, to provide guidance regarding the financial documents that you'll need to submit.
Good morning. As Paula mentioned earlier, the DCP program is funded by a grant from the federal government through the American Rescue Plan Act. Some of you may already know, having received government funds in the past, when federal dollars are part of the process, there's an additional level of scrutiny that comes with the reporting and use of those funds. The foundation will be required to perform a single audit for the next 3 to 4 years when monitoring this program. In addition to our regular audit, the single audit is part of an upward reporting process that begins with you, the grantee, through the foundation. We are responsible to the county, and then the county is ultimately responsible to the U.S. Treasury for the proper administration and spending of these dollars. That being said, we're requiring certain amount of documentation in front of your application process to make it work. In 2022, we processed the first round of informational or intervention and transformative grants. And as part of that first round, we learned a few things. First, the financial review process is quite time consuming. 2 to 3 hours per application, and further due diligence in reporting back to the committee. To get in front of this process for the next round, we're asking that the financial information be submitted with the LOI application. Next, I'd like to talk about the financial indicators form and some of the documentation that we'd like you to provide. I'm going to share a screen real quick. So this is the financial indicators form that we will be requiring everybody to submit with their LOI application. This is required for being considered for an application, for to being invited to apply. And a couple things I want to point out. Please use your most recent 3-year comparative fiscal year audits, as well as the 990s that go along with it. And what I mean by comparative, generally an audit will have both this year's and last year's information in a single report. And please make sure that they match the form. The indicators form is an Excel document that is protected. So anywhere you see gray information, you will need to put in information. It will automatically do the math for you as you go down and do it. And part of the analysis that we go through on the indicators form is looking for significant variances year to year in certain areas. If there are variances, please use the notes box at the bottom to give us a hint as to what those variants were. And a couple examples could be, in 2019, your liabilities could have gone from 100,000 to 300,000 because you received a PPP loan. That would be something helpful to let us know if there's a variance in your liabilities like that. Also, was there a decrease in your revenue because of the COVID shutdown? Things like that are helpful for us to know up front, because we will look for those deltas. And if they're not noted in the notes section, it's something that we have to go and research. Finally, I want to mention one thing, that your finance teams are your friend. We suggest you ask your finance team or your outside audit firm to complete the form for you, as well as provide you with the supporting documents that we need. They will be the most aware of your financial situation. They are intimate with all of the underlying information in the financial information. And they'll best be able to provide you with the information and explanations that we need to process your application properly. We also suggest that you provide this to your finance team or your outside accounting firm early so that they can get this prepared and done for you prior to the deadline for the LOI application being submitted.
Thank you, David.
Yep.
We appreciate your input. And I know we've given all of you a lot of information. We'd like to open things up by answering any questions you might have. If you have not already, please enter your questions in the Q&A section. Any that are new, we will add to our frequently asked questions on the website, so you will have access to those as well. And I think we're ready to go. Laura?
Sure. Mary, I'll start this question off maybe with you. There's a question on for food pantries, if we would fund personal care items or diapers from food pantries, even with the restriction on the purchase of food.
The idea is to not fund commodities, and a portion of one of the eligible things for the ARPA funding that we've already given to food pantries included money for essential commodities. So I can circle back on that, but my initial answer would be no. The idea is that the purchase of commodities to be distributed to clients would not be eligible because we're funding that out of a different pot of money.
Perfect. There's a couple of questions on receiving the financial indicators form, and Barb can jump in, but if you go to the foundation's website, you can see a preview of the LOI. And if you click into that, there's a link to view the financial indicators form. I'm sure we could also send it out to the attendees so that you can have it today, but it is available ahead of time for you to be able to pass it to your finance team. There's another question, can funds be used for remodeling of sites? So they're asking to make a space into a food pantry or those types of renovations. Barb, I'll give that one to you.
Well, the intention is that we are not funding bricks and mortar. So unless somebody else wants to jump in, I'm thinking that bricks and mortar would not be covered. Mary, do you?
Yeah, I would agree that that this is, and it looks like member Deacon Garcia is nodding her head as well. No, the intent behind the immediate intervention grants wouldn't line up with bricks and mortar and capital improvements. So no.
There are a couple questions about funding religious organizations or faith-based groups. Barb, do you want to touch on that?
Sure. We do fund religious organizations, but the focus has to be on those 4 priority areas, and there can't be any religious requirement to access those services. So if you're, for example, if it's a food pantry and it's under a church, you would be able to apply. It would be the religious organization could apply, but it's for something like food capacity. But you cannot require any religious access. I don't know the word.
And they would have to be a 501c3
Yes.
charitable organization.
Yeah.
So oftentimes with faith organizations, the church or synagogue or itself is organized under a separate category, and then they have a 501c3.
Right. Thank you.
Mary, I'll give this one to you. For housing instability, can a grantee use funds to support rent or mortgage assistance?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another question on sort of collaborative requests. Could an organization use, maybe a faith-based one, use a 501c3 as a fiscal agent or maybe how can they work together to submit a request?
Well, if they have the 501c3, we're going to look at fiscal agents. How involved is if the organization is just using it for the 501c3, it's probably not going to rank very high. But if the fiscal agent is actually actively involved in the grant, I think we would consider it. But the responsibility will be on that fiscal agent because the grant would go to that fiscal agent. They would be 100% responsible for every aspect of the grant. So they really have to be an active partner.
Yeah, I would agree, not just the holder of the funds. They actually have to be providing some level of the services. So it has to be a collaborative effort, not just a kind of a bookkeeping situation.
Hey, Barb, can I make a comment on that too?
Sure.
So usually when a fiscal agent comes into play, an organization is using somebody else's 501c3 to get funding. When we ask for the financials to review that fiscal agent, a lot of times they have millions and millions and millions of dollars in assets because they're a larger organization like United Way or like some other organization that has multiple chapters in many states. It is very hard to distinguish the financial health of the organization that's ultimately going to receive the funds when you're giving the money to a large organization. So that is one thing that we might, if they are going to apply and we are going to consider them, we might ask for internal financial statements from that ultimate recipient just to see the financial health of who's ultimately
point.
receiving funds. So.
There is a question about the evaluation criteria that the population served is negatively impacted by the pandemic. They are asking, do you have to show proof in individual client files or more of a generalized overall program impact?
Do you want to take that, Barb?
Go ahead, Mary. I
Okay,
saw.
for this particular grant, no, you don't have to show it on an individual client level. You can show it through, statistics of the population in general. So no, there doesn't have to be like a specific documentation per household.
Mhm.
And this maybe can go into kind of two things. There's a question, can you apply under more than one criteria, like housing and mental health? And maybe another question that we've seen is, can you submit more than one application? Barb, I'll give that one to you.
Yeah, so yes, you can apply for more than one. However, the intention is really that if you apply for two, the committee is probably going to only really consider heavily one, because there are going to be a lot of applicants and we want to, stretch things as far as we can. But you can submit two, but we really would suggest that you pick the one that you think is the most pressing and the one where you really need the funding. The other part of the question.
Can it cover more than one
Yes,
category?
absolutely. I think a lot of these grants actually cover multiple areas. Check all that apply, for every area that it would cover.
But if you're indicating that you're covering more than one area, you need to be collecting metrics for each of the issue areas. So if you say that you are addressing housing and mental health in your reporting, we're going to expect that there are housing metrics and mental health metrics.
There's another eligibility question about the 50% of clients. Is it 50% of the organization's clients or of a program's clients should be DuPage residents?
50% of the organization's clients. And when we say 50%, obviously, if an organizations that are providing a higher number are going to be considered kind of prioritized. We've got an organization that's doing similar work and they're 95% of their clients are DuPage compared to 51%. But yeah, it's an organization.
Barb, can we revisit? So if it's a large organization that's based in Chicago and then they have satellites, the organization itself might be less than 50%, but the specific DuPage-based program
They are
we're
eligible.
looking at, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right.
guidelines are very clear on that they would be eligible as long as they have a facility in DuPage County, or they have an advisory board that is dedicated specifically for DuPage, and they have some sort of record. They can actually show that that advisory board has been up and running. Does that answer?
But the DuPage-based program is where we would be looking for that 50% participant,
Yes.
right? Not the organization overall.
We would be looking, actually, we would be looking at the organization overall, but we, because they're based, well, no, you're right. Yep. That
Yeah,
would
so
be-
yeah.
I'm going to group a couple of these together for Mary or Barb. There's some questions on funding staff in different ways, shapes, or forms. For housing, could it fund case managers, or for food pantries, could it fund additional staff? Do either of you want to talk on funding for staff positions?
We have funded staff, but if you are applying for staff, you really have to have a plan, a sustainable plan to ensure that you could continue to support that staff beyond this particular year, because there's no promise of funding in the future. We also, based on our experience last year, we need a really good assessment of what you think that is going to cost. So I think we're going to be looking very much at, if you're applying for a case manager, is the amount that you're planning to fund that particular person, is it reasonable? And do we think you will be able to hire somebody at that salary? That's going to be really important. But yes, you can apply for that, but you would really need to be ready to go.
Right. I think one of the maybe more effective ways is that we've seen other organizations handle it is they've expanded a part-time position to a full-time position with, that same person in there. So there's no lead time in posting and hiring, remembering this is a 12-month grant.
Yeah.
Or overtime for staff, those kinds of things.
There's another question. In addition to income levels of clients, is cultural or racial diversity looked at in how the requests are evaluated?
I'm sorry, Barb, were you taking this one? I certainly can if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we want to make sure is that we're reaching down into, underrepresented communities, many of whom were the most severely impacted by the pandemic and the economic downturn. So, addressing particular demographics, cultural issues is absolutely something that's looked favorably upon by the evaluation team.
And Barb, I'll give this one to you. When are grant activities, or when can those funded activities be start and end? So when does the grant period start? Do people get reimbursed?
Okay, so the grant begins when it's awarded. So we are planning in July. So when that would be when the grant period starts, and it's 12 months. If it does not cover expenses that you've incurred before that date, and it would be the funds have to be deployed by the end of the grant period.
Is it reimbursement or?
It is no, it's not a reimbursement. You would receive the grant up front, but there's an expectation, and you do sign a grant agreement indicating that you will follow the grant agreement, and there is an expectation that you use those funds within the year and use it for the purpose, because we don't like to take money back, but that is the expectation if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
There's another question about the COVID impact and how, as that has evolved, how we're looking at the impact of COVID, or maybe how that's changed. Mary, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think we continue to see residual effects. We continue to see people who, who were impacted and or populations that were impacted that are, trying to get back on track. So we're not necessarily looking at, hospitalization rates, those kinds of things. We're looking at the way work has changed, the way education has changed, The food with inflation, we're seeing, we know that the food pantries are seeing increased need for rent assistance with rents increasing. So it's not sort of the, kind of the disease impact anymore. It's more sort of the economic impact.
And mental health and substance use, we know that has escalated as a result of the pandemic. So I see one here for David. Are you saying that the fiscal agent and the holder provide reporting?
Yes. So when I mentioned earlier that, I guess I'd give you an example. If you're a church and you're part of the diocese, right? And the church doesn't file any 990s or they don't have an audited financial statement, you're going to submit the information based on the diocese's 990 and financial statement. In doing that, when we go through it, it will be clear to us that this is probably not simply just for your organization. And we would come back to you and say, can you provide us some internal financial reporting that we would be able to make an assessment of? Because for us to evaluate this application for one small segment of the diocese as a whole, be very hard for us to do using the diocese's financial position. And ultimately, we're going to be making that grant to the diocese, not to the organization. It will be up to them to make sure that those funds are expended in a manner that they're intended.
Real quick, I saw one more question about reporting. There's an onerous monthly reporting requirements for some grants. This you will report at the conclusion of the grant period, which would be 1 year after it's awarded. So you do not have to report to us with this particular process every single month, but we do expect you to keep track throughout the year.
Of every dollar.
Of every dollar.
Because
Yep.
ultimately, we have to account for every one of those dollars.
Yep.
And report to the county, who then has to report to the federal government. So.
Well, thank you all for participating in our information session today. We appreciate very much all that you do for those in need in DuPage County. Thank you to Barb, Paula, Mary, and David for all the information you've provided. We have reached the end of our 30-minute session. Frequently asked questions will be added to those already on our website. A recording of this session will be posted to the website within the next few days. We're excited about the partnership and look forward to all we can accomplish together. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.